Okay, we're on to chapter 11 here. A couple of examples from 11.1 having to do with simple interest. Simple interest is this formula here, with I being the interest, P being the principal amount or the original amount of money, R is the rate, and T is the time. So it's very important to put the rate as a decimal. Many times you will be given the rate as a percentage. You need to change that to a decimal to use this formula. So this is pretty simple. All we're doing is multiplying the principal times the rate times the time. Now, another thing to be careful of is we're talking about simple interest. So unless it says the interest is calculated monthly, then we're just using 1 year as our base, right? 1 year. If it's in days, we're going to use 360 days. That's just the way the book uses it. Obviously, there's more than 360 days in a year, but the book uses 360 days, so that's what we'll be using. So we're always taking part of a year, unless it's very clearly stated. Otherwise, we'll do an example of that to show you what I'm talking about. So here we're looking at number 4. All we're doing is finding the interest. We have the principal, we have the rate, we have the time. So all we're doing here is plugging this into the formula for simple interest, and we're saying the interest is going to be the principal times the rate. And again, the rate must be changed to a decimal. 6% is 0.06, and the time here is 1 year. So that's all we're doing here. We're just multiplying those numbers together. We get 2,000 times 0.06, and we end up with $120 of interest for 1 year. So it's just 6% of 2,000. $120 is the simple interest earned when you invest $2,000 at 6% interest for 1 year. And just to do an example where it's not just 1 year, but it is in something other than 1 year. It's in 45 days. So here we're just looking at the interest being the principal times the rate. Again, change the rate to a decimal. And this time we're using 45 out of 360 days. So that's different than here. This was 1 year, so 1 year. Here it's 45 days out of 360. So this is the calculation that we're making here. 12,000 times 0.078 times 45 divided by 360. Make sure you put this in parentheses. Order of operations. Make sure your calculator is doing things correctly. And we should get $117 for our answer for the simple interest earned. If you invest $12,000 at 7.8% interest for 45 days. 45 days out of 360 days is the time. Simple interest based on 1 year. Rate of interest, principal, gives us $117 of simple interest. Now, another couple of questions, types of questions you'll see in this section are maturity values. So in the first couple questions, we were finding just the amount of interest added to the principal. Now we want to know what is the final amount that we have if we invest a certain amount of money at a certain rate. This is the case I was talking about monthly. If it specifically says monthly, then the time is going to be in months, not in years. And here the time is in 3 months. So our T here is 3, not 3 out of 12, like it would have been if it was if the rate was annual, then 3 months would be 3 out of 12 months. But here we're specifically told that the interest is calculated monthly. So T is 3 months. Our T is going to be 3. So here, the maturity value, as we see here, is the principal plus the interest. So we're calculating the interest the same way. It's just now we're adding that to the principal. So we can say the maturity value is going to be the principal. We can look at it like this and realize if we distribute this, we're getting the principal, P times 1, and then plus the principal times rate times time, which we know is the interest, right? So that's all that's going on here. We're doing the same thing we did last time to find the amount of interest, but now we're adding it to the principal. So in this case, our maturity value is going to be 13,000 plus the interest, which is 13,000 times the rate as a decimal, and the time is 3 for 3 months. Right? So now we calculate that number, and we're going to get 13,000 plus 13,000 times 0.014 times 3, and we come up with $13,546. So that's the maturity value, or the final amount, after 3 months, when interest is calculated monthly, and our original amount of money is 13,000. And we can easily find out what the interest is, right? The interest is just going to be the final amount minus the original amount. So if you're asked for the interest here, the interest is going to be $546. All right, so that was the only difference between the first two. Is in the first couple questions, we were just finding the interest. Now we're adding the interest to the principal to get the maturity value. And sometimes you'll be asked for another unknown in the formula. So here we're using the same interest formula, PRT. But here we're given the P, the I, and the T. So we're looking for the rate. So it's just a different unknown. So here we're just going to plug these values into this simple interest formula and say the interest equals the principal times the rate, which is what we're looking for, and the time here is going to be 3 over 12. Simple interest, again, based on a year, 3 months, 3 out of 12 months. That's going to be the time period. So we're solving for R. So what we're going to do is just divide everything by everything other than R, right? And we can change this 3/12 to 1/4 just to make it a little easier, right? 3/12 is 1/4, same fraction here. So if we divide both sides by that number, we're going to end up with the rate, right? The 500 over 500 cancels out, it's just the number 1. And 3/12 and 1/4 is the same thing, that just equals 1. So over here we just have the rate. So now we're just calculating this number. We can throw that into a calculator. You can look at 1/4 is 0.25. We can say 10.25 over 500 times 0.25, and we'll see what we get. 1025 divided by 500 times 0.25. Again, make sure you put the denominator in parentheses just to be careful. And we end up with a rate of 0.82. Okay, so now just like we changed the rates from percentages to decimals, we can change from decimal to a percent and say this is 8.2%. And that's going to be our rate. Okay, so here, again, 4 unknowns. We're given 3 of the unknowns and asked to solve for that 4th one. All right, so that's section 11.1.